Hello, thank you for joining the webinar today. The holiday season is fast approaching, and with it, a heavy dose of office parties. Some parties get out of hand. This can transform a celebration into a lawsuit or worse, a tragedy. There is a real case where a corporate executive decided for whatever reason that he would moon his staff. That's why we have the song Blue Moon as a title. There were the employees at an office party who decided to play Spin the Bottle. That spun out of control. There's a supervisor who demanded that his subordinate dance slow dances with him all night long. That was a slow dance that slowed down his career. And then there are cases with females who drank too much and then did things they oftentimes regretted doing. When this has happened, unfortunately, this has led to embarrassment and liability. Oftentimes, office parties, because of the alcohol, because of the time of year, lead to a time of escalating peer pressure. And in fact, there is a survey that came out recently that said that 29% of adults have either observed or experienced sexual harassment at office parties. A client of mine that I had worked with in the past came to me because he had some problems. One of the problems was that he was accused of sexual harassment because he had, believe it or not, an inflatable doll in his office. He told me that he wanted to have his office party at a bar, and that raised several serious concerns. But those concerns paled when I found out that he also planned to take the employees directly across the street to, yes, a strip club. Then there is a multinational company that I had done some work with, and in its infinite wisdom, or should I say lack thereof, they decided to have free drinks for their high-level salespeople who were attending a business conference in Atlanta. Surprisingly, one of the employees, John, drank way too much, and he was a sloppy drunk. Jill also drank too much, and she was a sloppy drunk. You can imagine now issues concerning inhibition when John is caught chasing Jill down the hall by a hotel surveillance camera, and believe it or not, John is only in his underwear. There are a lot of sad cases involving injury that have arisen after people left office parties. There are people who drank too much, got into accidents. Recent series of cases I looked at involved, for example, crossing over the double yellow line and getting involved in an accident with a third party. There was a tragic case that came down not that long ago where one of the employees saw that his coworker had drunk way too much, and he said to her, "I'll drive you home. Just stay here." He went to get his keys. He got his jacket. He came back, and she was already gone. She left. She drove her car into a tree. And then there was a case that came down around the same time where two employees in their infinite wisdom decided to go for drag race. And what we're going to talk about is the reality that issues can arise involving employees, whether the same level or one is superior and the other is subordinate. Those issues can arise at the parties. There can be harassment by a third party. And just as in the workplace, you are responsible when a third party, whether it's a vendor or a client, is harassing your employees. They have a right to freedom from that harassment. And by the same token, it's not appropriate for your employee to be harassing a third party. Employees could get injured at parties, and that's a real issue that could occur. We'll talk about ways to limit the potential of injury and ways to limit the exposure or liability when there are injuries. And there are injuries that can be caused by the employees, like, for example, when they leave, having had too much to drink, and they drive the car. We also should be aware of bullying. There is no reason to tolerate bullying in the office or at the office parties. And there are other types of potential liabilities that we're going to talk about. But keep in mind, and one of the reasons why we do a program like this is because there are lawyers who will have a person visit them for a consultation and describe the horrible thing they perceive happened or really did happen at an office party or an event. And the lawyer is going to try to cast as broad a net as possible to get to the deep pockets, and they'll be looking for you. Holiday parties are a different breed unto themselves. People behave differently when they're at the holiday party. Part of it is the time of year, part of it is the alcohol, part of it is that they're seeing people maybe for the first time in an environment other than the ordinary workplace, or they're exchanging conversations or activities with people they don't usually see. For example, people in a different location. You may be in an office that has got offices in other parts of the country, or a person in the field is interacting with people in the office. Add alcohol to the mix. Alcohol eases the inhibitions people have. They tend to act differently. They don't even realize it oftentimes, but there is an impact alcohol has in the workplace. There are people who have expectations of what their holiday should be. Part of this is media and all the hype that surrounds your holidays and the upcoming new year. And because of those expectations, because of where they are, because of the change in the dynamics in the alcohol, there is an emotional factor that takes place. And when you've got people together, there is that other ingredient, peer pressure. So now that we have talked about the pressure, let's talk about other things that can happen. When companies prepare for the holiday party, it has been my experience that one of the problems they have is time pressure. They don't have the time to do great training during the course of the year because they're so busy. They don't have time to have their employees get away from their workplace. They need people to be working. They need people to be focused. And time pressure is a real issue. So because of that, they don't always have the same kind of training policies that I would like to see and judges I'm in front of would like to see. Some people are amiable. They go to an office party and they see that person who's bullying, who's boisterous, who's getting louder and louder, who's harassing somebody, but they don't want to step up. They don't want to cause an issue, so they are silent and allow this to continue. And then there's that issue of just people interacting again in a different environment. Oftentimes it could be a client who feels empowered to cross that line. One of the other problems is that oftentimes at holiday parties, there's nobody taking ownership of how people behave. Yeah, people are busy having fun, so nobody feels a responsibility towards how others act. There's also things people just don't know. For example, what does my insurance policy provide? Does that vendor I hired, that event planner I hired, does that person or that entity have insurance? They haven't thought these things through. And because it's just something that's not on their radar. Hindsight's 20/20. We know Monday morning what the quarterback and the coach should have done on Sunday or Saturday, but we didn't know it at the time. So these are things to think about, and hopefully a program like this will initiate a dialogue. So the things we're going to talk about the policies that are good policies. We're going to talk about training your employees on the policies. How do you staff your events so people are accountable? What insurance do you have? What should you potentially have? And What about the insurance for vendors you work with? Control over the environment, the event, to minimize other concerns. We'll talk about the kinds of programs or events that you're going to have, with the contracts that you have with vendors, with third parties, are something that we'll address. And finally, project management is a great tool to ensure that you're doing what you need to do on time. Now, when it comes to having policies, people often look at HR and say, well, HR is just a traffic cop. They're there as a cost center. They really don't add anything. You know, it's a necessary evil. Whatever we spend on them is wasted. Well, I don't think that HR is a traffic cop. I think HR is a profit center for business for a host of reasons. And one of the things that's real important is that they help you create a robust policies and procedures. And one of the things we can add to your policy manual to make it even better for the upcoming year is what is expected of your employees, not just in the workplace, but when they are away from the workplace. For example, if they're at a program or a seminar or at the holiday party, people need to know what is expected of them. With that, then they should know how they should comport themselves. And the policies you've got need to be disseminated. There are times where a company comes up with a good policy for what should or should not happen at a particular event, but they don't bother to send it out. Or it's just a verbal caution and it's not in writing. Disseminate that policy and make a record, a paper trail. Give me something to work with if I've got to deal with an issue that arises at your party. So the eye of the tiger, that's a training reference from the Rocky movies. We need to train the employees on your brilliant, your wonderfully worded policies and procedures. Really, it should be done on an annual basis. And the training should include what happens when we're away from the workplace. And it is helpful to make the employees aware of the resources that will be available at the party. Yes, the resources. If someone feels she's being sexually harassed at your office party, who is available at the party for her to go to? Many of the companies I work with have a dial-in number if you've got a concern that's an HR concern. Well, that's not good enough if you're being harassed at a holiday party. There should be someone in the room they can talk with. Who is that person going to be? And do your employees know who that person is? And how will you prove in court that they knew who they can go to at the office party? Or if someone's drinking too much, who is going to be the person that they can go to? Again, have a record. Have a record that you create in files that's disseminated. And if the expectations are clear, what can and cannot happen, and what you should do if it happens, either to you or you witness it happening to someone else, make the expectations of what your employees should do clear to them. I'll backtrack. 29% of adults either witnessed or were the victim of sexual harassment at holiday parties. That's not acceptable. Auditing is a great way to make sure that your policies are getting through to people. Are you actually walking the floor to see whether people are behaving, whether the people who are there to keep an eye open for a person who's either drinking too much or misbehaving in some other manner? Are those people actually walking the floor, or are they off in the corner drinking themselves? Audit. See how people respond when a complaint is made. This does two things. One, this helps eliminate problems before they become major problems at your events. And more importantly, this gives your lawyer something to argue that's very compelling if, God forbid, there's a litigation that arises as a result of what happened at your party. So we're going to have a person or people who are designated to be accountable to walk the room at your party. They're going to be looking for abuse of alcohol. They're going to be looking for sexual harassment or other forms of harassment, Keep an eye open for bullying. While bullying may or may not be something that is legal in your jurisdiction, certainly it's not putting your company's best foot forward at its party if there is bullying or hazing. And then they'll keep an eye open to other potential issues. Is there any kind of roughhousing or other problems that are taking place? They are there to ensure both that people have a good time and a safe time. Now, the bridge over troubled waters is the insurance. Unfortunately, too many times I've been told, well, we thought that the insurance policy covered this event, and the carriers denied coverage. So there are a couple of things. First, make sure your policy does cover events, and then think about what you can do to minimize your risk if there is an issue that arises. Of course, in cases where third parties were hurt in car accidents after an event, or an employee or a guest of an employee was hurt in a car accident after an event, they're going to look to see whether or not employees were expected to attend the event or it was optional. If you have the party off-site in another location and you have a third party that is handling the event, for example, a restaurant or a catering hall or facility, then there is a distance that the company has from what happens at the event. And add to that following recipe: serve food, plenty of food, protein, things that help people, if they're drinking too much, absorb the alcohol. Have sundries, have gifts, and things like that. But please, let the employees pay for their own alcohol. By having the employees pay for the alcohol, limits or reduces your exposure if a person's drinking too much. Here's another trick. Have a policy that's disseminated to your employees that says if someone has been drinking too much and they appear impaired to the judgment of your organization, then that person will be given transportation home. They will take the keys, we'll get them home safely. That makes a huge difference. By doing that, by having that policy in place, even if you're wrong and the person was not impaired, but you erred on the side of caution, you limit your exposure. Control. A few other things. Again, let people buy their own alcohol. They're at an office party. Maybe they have 2 drinks. Fine. Let them pay for it. You know, by having free alcohol, maybe you're being generous, but you're creating more risk. Now, my advice is conservative. I'm not telling you you have to do this. I am telling you this would be a good thing to do. The location and the timing. Is it an afternoon party? Is it an evening? Is it a 2, 3, 4, 5-hour event? If the event is longer, guess what? People will drink more alcohol. If the event is longer and it's been a long day, they will also be tired. That's a bad combination of a person who's tired and drank too much. Was the attendance mandatory or expected? If it is mandatory, or if it's made clear, if you want to succeed in this job, you will attend the party, then it's going to be viewed by a court more likely than not that the event was part of their employment. And if something happens as a result of their action when they left the place of the event, then the company is more likely to be liable for it. There are also some concerns that you should explore before picking a location for an event or what you're going to do in an event, and that is the impact of disability laws. Keep in mind, first and foremost, some people who have an alcohol problem and don't drink should not be in a position where they are pressured to drink. Is there handicap accessibility for a person who's physically challenged? Double check these things before the event is booked. The more you anticipate and provide for these types of issues, the better off you will be. So what are we doing at the party? Are we going to have music? Are we going to have dancing? Do we really need to have dancing at our party? It's great to have music playing, but if we do the dancing, do we run the risk of that supervisor who's slow dancing all night long? Are we going to have a theme? Are people in costumes? Are we going to be having like a 60s hippie party or a 50s party, or are we going to do something from the roaring 20s? What kind of theme are we going to have? Will we have icebreakers at the event? For example, are we going to have some kinds of games that are organized that people are going to play? There was a party shortly after I started doing employment law in the, I hate to admit it, late 1980s, where it was a good idea to play Twister at a party. Yes, Twister. Not a good idea, in my opinion, but they thought it was good. Scavenger hunts. This is a theme that people sometimes do at events, and the scavenger hunt can be a lot of fun. We've got to go out and find things, but people are drinking, they're going to the stairwell, they're running up and down the stairs, trying to get that last item so they win the prize, and they're a little bit drunk, and that's when you have things like broken legs. Believe it or not, there was a party not that long ago where there was the good idea of mixing alcohol and cliff diving, and it had a tragic ending. Other sports. Do we have a football game? And if people are drinking too much, are they more likely to get hurt playing football at your office event? Also, we now introduce guests into the mix. Keep in mind that there might be a situation where Bob and Laura don't get along very well. Bob has been harassing Laura on more than one occasion. Now, what sometimes does happen is, if we know this, don't invite Bob to the event. So, contracts are a great way to protect your organization from potential liabilities. And when you get into a contract and you're talking about working with a vendor, what are some of the things that you want to do? You want to shift responsibility to the vendor. Make sure the vendor's got insurance. Make sure the vendor understands when they must deliver, what they want to deliver. Be as clear as possible. What kind of food are you going to have? Who's your contract with for the food? What's going to happen if there's a cancellation because there's a huge storm, a snowstorm or something like that? Are you responsible for the food? Same thing with the liquor. Your agreement with the liquor, make it clear the guests are paying for the liquor, or you're providing liquor, or you're only providing wine and beer, but you're not providing hard alcohol. This limits your liquor liability. What about physical injury? Whose insurance policies are going to cover any risks that take place in your event? And that would be real helpful. And I think that's something that, again, we can talk about. And again, cancellation fees. If there's going to be an event, a snowstorm, many of you are in the north, and sometimes we get snow and ice in December. What happens if this takes place? I see I had a question. What about companies who have alcohol on site on an ongoing basis, such as a beer tap? Is there liability for the employer even with a company which employs people in this industry? The answer is yes. Whenever you've got alcohol on tap, you've got some sense of responsibility. This can be mitigated by having very clear policies on when the employees can and cannot consume alcohol. And there's got to be people, again, who are responsible if someone is serving too much alcohol, to take the keys and not let them drive home. For example, restaurants that I work with oftentimes have very clear policies regarding how much alcohol the bartender can consume. We're not in those time periods where one for the customer, one for me, one for the customer, one for me. But this is something that, first off, should be in your policy. Second, it should be audited. And third, it should be provided for in your insurance policies. Now, getting back to things along the lines of third-party concerns, try to anticipate in your agreements that the liability, for example, for negligence, is shifted to the host or the bartender at your party, and that they've got insurance that will adequately cover any kind of loss. So when we project manage, one of the big things that we're going to do is interview the facilities and the vendors and ask about the insurance. Look at the insurance. You should have a copy of their policy or claim pages in your paperwork. Talk to your insurance company, again, far enough in advance of an event so you can research and get answers. But talk to your insurance company as much as possible to make clear whether or not you've got coverage if something bad happens. Do a review before booking. Think about, for example, if you've got a person in a chair coming to the event, can they actually get inside? Are the bathrooms handicapped? Is the building accessible? When you create your guest list, think about that situation. Remember, Bob was harassing Lisa. We don't want that to happen here. If Bob had problems with her in the past, Bob should not be on your guest list. And training, the eye of the tiger. Make sure you're training the people who are at the event, who are employees of your firm, who are the ambassadors and the representatives of your firm at this event, and also the people who are walking the floor, like the Rhinestone Cowboy. Assign the responsibility and accountability so that it is clear who is walking the floor to make sure there are no problems and who people are going to go to if there is a problem. Make that as crystal clear as possible. So that designated host or hosts, they know what to look for. They know what to do if they see that there's a problem. They know whether they are authorized to stop that problem or, in the alternative, who they're going to go to report the problem, and they need to understand that they must act immediately, not when they get around to it. Now, one other thing to think about. Do you have a valet parker at your event? Is that something provided for by the facility? If there is a valet parker and you've got a person who's walking the floor looking for people who've drunk too much, you've just doubled the chances of not having a problem because the valet parker and your team are going to make sure that people are not driving who are impaired. Document all these things that you're doing. And again, we don't want this to be a nightmare. We want it to be a dream. We want it to be a celebration. So as a quick review, prepare and disseminate your policies. Make sure you have a well-trained team of employees as well as the people who are the hosts of the event. Make sure these people understand that they are all accountable for their action and the action of their colleagues. Review your insurance. Make sure you've got control. How long is your event? What time of day is it? Where is it? Think about the themes and the entertainment and the good and the bad, the pros and the cons. Think about your contracts. Make sure your contracts are clear. The project management approach ensures that you do things in a timely manner. Now, school's out for summer. Thank you all for attending this program. Have a very good day.